You've probably heard the term, good is the enemy of great. Well, that is what this book by Jim Collins is all about, Good to Great. Now, Jim Collins and his team researched all of the big companies that went from just good companies to truly great companies. Now, while this book really focuses on businesses, he also says not only is good is the enemy of great is a business problem, it's also a human problem. So really in this video, I also want to apply this to our lives. So no matter who you are, if you truly want to have that great potential in your life, stay tuned. Now we're gonna go over a few key elements in the book, but then we are also going to, at the end, so stick around to the end, we're going to talk about how to sustain that greatness. Now, why read a book like this? Well, when you surround yourself with greatness, it will help you and force you to actually excel and be the best you. Now, Darwin Smith, I really liked this quote. He said, "I never stopped trying to become qualified for the job." So becoming great is a constant learning process, surrounding ourselves with the people who are great, reading the books that teach us how to be great. That's all what this YouTube channel is all about. So now we're going to learn how by looking at Jim Collins' research in this book. Now, one of the first elements in these good to great companies is the who. And the first who is the leaders. Even though they tried to kind of make that not part of what they were researching, it was no denying it. Leadership is part of what helps make good companies go to a great company. Now, Jim Collins calls these level 5 leaders. And really the main thing to remember is that they had this really almost paradoxical quality to them, that they were equally humble and at the same time equally ambitious for the mission of the company. So it was all about getting this company to greatness. It wasn't about making them great, so it wasn't as self-centered. It was all about the company. So this is actually really hard to find in people. So it's kind of rare to find this equally humble, giving other people credit, and also equally ambitious, where they do whatever it takes to make this company great. Now, the second who of the keys to making a great company is about getting the right people. He really emphasized that it is so important to make sure you have the right people. In fact, they even said it's important to make sure you get that first, even before the how. Get the right people on the bus, and then you can figure out where to take the bus. So getting the right people in the right seats, because you may have a really good person, but if for some reason they're not at that greatness level, before you completely kick them to the curb, make sure they're just not in the right seat or the wrong seat. Don't compromise on your people. In fact, let that limit your growth. If you cannot find the great people, then that's where the company needs to be. This is how important it was to get all the right people. Now, you might start to understand why this makes sense, but a big part of this is developing this culture as well. If you have this culture of great people, right people in the right seats, you retain the right people. You discourage the wrong people, and you create this culture to boost and get the company in the right direction. Now, these right people, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody gets along, they don't argue. Actually, on the contrary, you need this balance of people who are willing to argue about getting to the right answer. So it's not about arguing just to be right, it's to get to the right answer for the company. Now, how does this apply to us as our lives? Same thing about being a great individual, the best us, is surrounding yourself with the best people who are going to challenge you and get you to that level. I think I say this a lot because I'm really passionate about this. the people you surround yourself with is so important. Even when you're a child, one of the best things we can encourage teenagers to do is to surround themselves with really good friends. And not just like the relationship good, but good kids. That is so important. It really is going to impact what happens and puts you in the right mindset to accelerate to that greatness level. The other real advantage about this, speaking of friends, is that when they looked at the great companies, the people at these companies, they really became like family. They liked each other. They liked going to work and being with each other. It creates such a unique culture that people want to be there. Now, moving on from the who is the climate. So it's another little bit of a paradox here. The good to great companies were able to embrace the brutal facts and at the same time maintain faith that they were going to be great. So you can't be blind to the hard facts, that you deal with those, you see them, you deal with them, but at the same time you remain faithful. There was actually a story that I've read in a couple of different books where it was someone recounting their experience in a prison of war camp in Vietnam. And what he said, the difference from the people who died in that prison of war camp and the people who survived were that the survivors, they realized the hard facts. They were in prison of war camp. At the same time, they were very hopeful. They had faith that they were going to get out of it, but they didn't set a deadline. They didn't say, oh, we'll be home by Christmas. They knew that they were gonna get out, but they accepted that it was a really hard predicament. They didn't know when, but they kept on believing. That was the difference. So in these good to great companies, you have to understand what is the challenge. What's the brutal truth? Whether we like it or not, you've got to face it. But at the same time, it's an exciting as in, okay, we got this. That's the climate, this mentation that you want to have within your company, also yourself too. Facing the hard truths, the brutal facts, but maintaining that we're gonna get through it. Not only are we gonna get through it, we're going to be amazing. We're going to win. We're going to get where we want to go. How were they able to establish this type of climate? Well, the things that they talked about were, one is ask questions and keep asking them until you fully understand the brutal facts. They especially see this with leaders. There's no blaming, it's just genuinely curiosity. Help me understand the situation. That was the mindset that helped establish this climate. The next step was that they encouraged debate, not coercion, but debate, a good scientific debate that helped with this climate. And lastly, they were able to build in red flag moments. So this was where in the process, as early as possible, can we do kind of like a feeler, right? So if this clicks, okay, we need to address this now. So for an example, sometimes you don't know that there's a disgruntled customer until you've already lost them. So where in the process can it be like a red flag? We need to look at this. It's like, hey, look at this. We need to fix this so we can solve those problems before we actually end up losing the customer to never see them again. So that's setting those red flag moments. And I think when it comes to applying this to ourselves, some of this is trying to understand ourselves. Like, what is going to set me off, or what's going to get me distracted? You know, all those little things. What is like the first sign that my thought process is going to go the way I don't want it to go? So those self-discovery moments, that takes time, but those are really important for us to learn how to be our best selves. When you are focused on the hard facts, eventually it's trying to get rid of the clutter and focusing on what's really important. You really have to simplify, avoid distractions, get through the clutter, and find the simple thing you need to focus on. Now, this part is really, really important. So if I lost you, come back. This is called the hedgehog concept. Now, this is getting down to the why and the how and getting to that simple focus, focusing on your one thing. So the hedgehog concept really comes down to these 3 circles. And the goal is to stick in the middle, find our middle. The 3 circles are, what are you most passionate about? Now this is something that you really have to think on. What are you so passionate about that no matter what, you are not going to get rid of that passion or your core values? Okay? This is so important for us as individuals to really think about, and whether you're trying to figure out what job do I want to do for the rest of my life, how do I become happy, even really trying to find your passion. And that may be kind of a fluffy word, right? But what are you truly, like, what's your core value? What makes you you? What makes you want to get up and fight in the morning, right? That is so crucial for us individually, but in these good to great companies, that was also something they had to figure out. What are we truly passionate about? And it's not necessarily that you have to be passionate about every single process, but this is a guiding focus, is that passion. Now the second one is going to be, you can be passionate all day long, but if you really want to go from good to great, what can you also be the best at? Now, I myself have had to think about this one before. I am a multi-passionate person, if you haven't figured out, if you know me. So passion's great, that's great. But what are you uniquely able to do better than anybody else? Now, these companies had to find that out too. What can we be the best at? You don't have to be the best now, but what could you be the best at? He gave an example, if you want to look at an individual example, there was, I think it was somebody's wife, and she really wanted to run a marathon. Now, she couldn't run it then when she decided, but she decided, I could do that. I could do that. And so she trained, she practiced, she was passionate about it. She said, I could do that. I can be good at that. And then she ended up winning. So those 2 things are really important. But again, at the end of the day, the idea is to get to the center where all 3 of these combine. So what's that 3rd thing? So you got the passion, you have to be the best in the world, and then you have to find, how does it make money? The economic driver. So this is the key to those good to great companies. It is that center of these 3 circles. And for you, if you're trying to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? How do I make a living and actually be happy at the same time? It's sitting down and looking at these 3 circles. Now, at first, if you're like me, you kind of panic.
Hey, no, don't panic.
You're like, okay, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I still don't know. They found that the average time for these good to great companies to actually find their hedgehog in the middle was 4 years.
4 years?
4 years was the average. It's okay if you don't have this all figured out tomorrow, but take this seriously. Start thinking about it. Keep it in your mind as you make decisions, and it'll come to you. So this is the hedgehog concept. This is how the companies became good to great. That's the why. The how is that you have to have discipline. The term discipline truly is your key to freedom, which sounds weird, right? But when you are disciplined, you are focused on your center here. That is the key to becoming the best.
Be the best.
Focus on what is important. I love the acronym WIN, win. What's important now? It's not an overnight thing that all of a sudden you're a great company. It takes time, it's growth, it's constant discipline, and simplified focus on your hedgehog concept, right? And so a lot of these companies couldn't name like one thing that just made it happen.
It's kind of a momentum thing.
It is momentum. It is this constant focus, constant discipline with the right people, and you finally get your momentum. You finally start seeing the results. That is the good to great strategy. Now, I promised you we would talk about how do you make enduring greatness. That would be Jim Collins' other book called Built to Last, which he actually wrote first. So this was actually more like a prequel, right? How do they get there? So the Built to Last concept, which is he does touch on in the end of this book, is coming back to knowing your core values, right? So I kind of group that in with passion. When you are staying true to your core values and your purpose, which by the way, there wasn't like a specific purpose that all of these companies had. It wasn't like the same core values. He said it doesn't seem to matter what they are, you just have to have them. And you have to have that as your focus. So you have to preserve your core values and purpose while your business strategies and operating practices, so those are businessy terms, your actions will adapt to the world. But your core values and your purpose don't change. So the person they said was one of the best examples of this duality, having very clear, unchanging purpose and core values, but adapting to a changing world, was Walt Disney. In 1923, Walt Disney was only 21, and he was at that time trying to be an animator. He moved from his home area in Kansas City to LA. He tried to get a job in the movie business, but nobody would hire him. He rented a camera and set up shop in his uncle's garage and started to make an animated cartoon. It wasn't until 1934, 11 years later, he took the bold steps and made the first full-length feature film, Snow White. Disney's consistent set of core values included passionate belief in creative imagination, fanatic attention to detail, abhorrence of cynicism, and the preservation of the Disney magic. And then finally, to bring happiness to millions, especially children. Now, Walt Disney went from cartoons to cruise lines, but he's always maintained his core values and his purpose, or the Disney company, and adapting and growing with this ever-changing world. What core values are you so passionate about that never, under any circumstances, would you give them up? The interesting thing about this book and their findings was that it's not necessarily harder to make a great company as it is to make a good company. It's all coming back to the simplicity, this focus, the discipline to find that hedgehog, the center of your passion, what you are best at, and to adapt with that changing world and find the economic driver. So why not go for greatness? So my last question for you, what work makes you feel compelled to try to create greatness? That is what you should do for the rest of your life. That is the career or the work or the life that you should be aiming for.
I love this job. And who's our next contestant?